Okay. But what does this lead to? Well, it's going to lead to some problems. Okay. Sometimes people are moving so fast into areas like New York and other cities that the cities become overcrowded. Cities don't have enough space for people to live in. Okay, so we see all these overcrowded immigrant neighborhoods and tenement apartments where, we have 2 to 3 families living in a small apartment, or one large family living in a very small apartment. Okay? And some of these apartments didn't even have bathrooms, so people are going to the bathroom off their balcony and causing major sewage problems in cities like New York City. Okay, it was a big, big problem. All right, these cities didn't have enough places for people to go to the bathroom. And we see all these ghettos develop in these major cities like New York City, Philadelphia, Boston, Pittsburgh. Yeah. And ghettos are the part of the city in which members of a minority group, immigrants in many cases in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and they're discriminated against because of their social, legal, or economic pressure that they're facing. Okay, so a lot of these immigrants that move into these big cities, they're struggling at first. Okay, and they're told they're not allowed to live in certain places because of the language they speak, the food they eat, the way that they dress, just their culture that they brought over from their other country. Okay. And all of these immigrant neighborhoods, they tended to be segregated. So, for instance, there may be a neighborhood full of Irish people, and they all worked unskilled jobs for really low wages. And they were under economic pressure, and they were told by city officials basically they had to live in this area with the rest of people who were coming to America, who were coming from the same culture that they were coming from, which would be the Irish culture in that example. So here, give you an idea of what these tenement apartments looked like. So you see these immigrant families just living in these small, very small apartments, and there'd be one bed between, maybe 4 family members. That's how tight these spaces were. And you see these immigrant groups experience heavy amounts of discrimination. Yeah, they wouldn't get hired by certain businesses. They wouldn't get hired to work certain jobs. So 2 of the groups that moved to America in very, very large numbers throughout the 1800s and early 1900s are the Irish and Chinese. Okay, and they're going to get treated unfairly in America. Okay, and they're not going to have a fair opportunity to succeed. Like I said, a lot of businesses aren't going to be willing to train them or hire them. A lot of businesses, especially in the eastern part of the United States, aren't going to hire Chinese immigrants. Okay, well, some Chinese immigrants are going to be very successful in America. Some are the first to work in gold mines, especially in areas in the western part of the United States like California and Colorado. And they're going to make a lot of money working in the gold mines. But it's important to note mining was a dangerous job during this time. Okay? And a lot of the Chinese are going to have some success building the railroad. They're going to get jobs building the railroad. They're going to become farmers. They're going to excel in factory work and the garment industry in the northeastern part of the United States, which is the same thing as the textile industry. Okay? But as the number of Chinese immigrants increased, so did discrimination against them. Okay? There were strong anti-Chinese beliefs in the American economy, so meaning that some people would not hire Chinese Americans simply because they were Chinese. Okay, so that's heavy discrimination. So even if a person who was Chinese was qualified for a job, sometimes they didn't get hired for that job simply just because they were Chinese. Okay. And a lot of people in America, they didn't like the Chinese because the Chinese were willing to work very hard for a very low wage. So if you were an average American who wanted to work for a fair wage, you might lose your job as a result of the company giving it to a Chinese immigrant who was willing to work harder and longer hours for way less money. And so that concept also caused a lot of Americans to dislike Chinese immigrants. And the Irish were also heavily discriminated against. Many Irish immigrants were thought to not be able to hold a skilled job. They were uneducated. A lot of Americans are going to characterize Irish immigrants as alcoholics and troublemakers. Okay. And they're going to monopolize low-paying jobs. Okay, they were thought to be unskilled, so no one would really give an Irish immigrant a chance to work, higher-paying job. So they were monopolized to, street cleaners or laborers in coal mines. Okay, and a lot of Americans thought that the Irish, they could work those hard blue-collar jobs. For low wages, but then after their shifts, they would go to, bars and restaurants and drink a lot and cause trouble. Okay. And people thought that all Irish immigrants were like that. They were all alcoholics. That was the common perception of them throughout America during this time. But not all Irish immigrants were alcoholics. Okay. And capable of only working unskilled jobs. But they got that label. They got that stereotype in America. And Jews were discriminated against heavily in America as well. All right. And when I say anti-Semitic, I mean anti-Jewish culture. Okay. So there are a lot of Americans who possess these anti-Jewish views or anti-Semitic views. They're going to occur before, during, and after the Civil War. General Ulysses S. Grant is going to be a very strong Christian. And during the Civil War, he's going to issue the expulsion of Jews from portions of Tennessee, Kentucky, and Mississippi that were under his control. He's going to say that, these Jews are bad for the country. This country is a Christian country. Okay, it should not be, contaminated with these Jewish beliefs. Abraham Lincoln's going to say that, hey, Ulysses S. Grant, you can't just kick Jews out of those areas. Okay, we have the right to freedom of religion in this country. But a lot of Americans saw Jews as a threat. They wanted America to be a majority of people who believe in Christianity, not Judaism. Okay? And a lot of Jews are going to be discriminated against for employment. They're not going to be hired for jobs simply due to their religious beliefs. They're given a quota for enrollment in colleges in the late 1800s because a lot of colleges wouldn't accept them due to their religious beliefs. So they're made to by the national government. They're made by the national government to accept a certain number of Jews to study. And in some areas, they were forbidden to buy property in the United States. Let's talk about Italians now. They were also seen as unskilled workers and were restricted to manual labor jobs similar to the Irish immigrants. Also due to their lack of formal education, they would compete with earlier immigrants for lower paying jobs like the Irish immigrants. And they were only allowed to live in certain areas of cities and towns due to them not being able to speak the English language. So a lot of African Americans a lot of Italians are going to have a growing hostility or aggressiveness towards them by other Americans. Poles, similar to the Irish and Italians, they were limited to unskilled work in the United States. A lot of people thought that the Polish immigrants were only capable of working on farms for a low wage. Right? They weren't capable of doing anything else in America. Okay, that was a popular belief held through the United States for a very long time. But eventually, people are going to notice that immigrants, a lot of them struggle upon moving into America. Okay? And there are a couple groups that emerged to help these immigrants adjust to living a free and successful life in the United States. Okay, and the first group we're going to talk about that helps immigrants is going to be progressive social reformers. They were mainly women They were well-educated women, and they would run these settlement houses. And one of the first settlement houses in the United States that became very successful and very popular was Hull House in Chicago. It was founded by Jane Addams in 1889. She was a well-educated woman with a lot of money, and she chose to give back to American society with her money and create this settlement house. Okay? And the goal of her settlement house was to successfully help immigrants integrate into mainstream American culture. So she taught immigrants English so they can communicate effectively with other English-speaking Americans. She's going to teach them how to cook American foods, grocery shop in America, sew American clothing, okay? Stenography, which is messaging, so they can go off and get a job, and other industrial skills so they can work in factories. Some immigrants are not going to have baths or showers in their apartments. So a lot of these settlement house workers and owners of settlement houses like Jane Addams, they're going to let the immigrants come into their settlement house to bathe. And they're also going to offer babysitting for their kids if they had to work all day. Okay, there's a lot of nursery schools. And then these settlement houses are also going to organize craft, art, music festivals. So the immigrants could attend and experience other aspects of American culture. And these settlement houses also serve for a meeting place for community groups, okay, where they can come and talk. So these are community groups like religious groups, political groups. A lot of members of the women's suffrage movement are going to utilize settlement houses for their meetings. Settlement houses are a place where politicians are going to deliver speeches as well. So here you see Hull House in Chicago in 1889, which is founded by Jane Addams, a very, very large house in the Chicago area in Illinois. And that will do it for our discussion today. I'll see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your day.